Let's begin with our first story. The cedi is expected to end the year a little above 7 cedis. That's according to projections by the Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies captured in its 2022 economic forecast on the Ghana cedi's outlook on the forex market. Charles Nixon-Boa has more in this report.
This means that the Ghanaian local currency will lose about 60 pesos in value this year to the world's most important currency. According to the Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies, its forecast of the end-year depreciation of the cedi to the dollar is 99% accurate. What this means is that cost of operations of businesses, particularly manufacturing, will go up. This will lead to increase in prices of some goods on the market. The center therefore wants the Bank of Ghana to supply enough forex to meet the demand of the dollar, as it appears the current forex auction strategy is not meeting the market demand for forex. This view of inadequate supply of forex, the center said, is gathered from the wide disparity that exists between the Bank of Ghana's forex market quote and the interbank market quote. Over the medium term, the center urged the state through the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Trade and Industry to show clear commitment in pursuing policies aimed at strengthening the local currency. In conclusion, it called for a coordinated and a balanced monetary and fiscal policy measures between the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance targeted at stabilizing the Ghana cedi.
Let's get on Zoom and interact with the Executive Director of Surface, Dr. Benjamin Amwan, with some more analysis. Doc, grateful that you could join us. First of all, congratulations. You almost got last year's projection of a 6.45 cedis to a dollar, right? And of course, how did you arrive by the 7.3 cedi to a dollar forecast for this year?
Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. First of all, we are quite excited that we were able to predict, not to celebrate the prediction, but then to provide a guide for businessmen and women who use the forex for their businesses. So that is the purpose of which we do the forecast, and also to provide some form of indication to the central bank on how best to manage the currency. How did we do it? We observed the behavior of the forex market and the supply of forex over time. We realized that the cedi's behavior follows some pattern. And then based on the pattern and the data point that we've gathered, we then try to forecast using some forecasting tools that we have in-house to do the prediction or the forecast.
Interesting, but about 60 pesos loss based on the projection means that the economy will be much impacted. What should businesses and households do to contain the sharp fall of the cedi to the dollar this year?
For businesses, it is up to the businesses to have strategies in buying the forward ahead of time, or making their quotes ahead of time with their bankers, so they can have the forex that they need for their transactions locked in at a price today or earlier than they will need in the future. Because if they are not able to lock in the price, then they expose themselves to the future volatility and the high price that they will have to contract for this same value of currency that they will need in the future. So the strategy is talk to your banker and then lock in a rate today for future delivery.
All right. Now, the report further expresses concern about the wide disparity that exists between the Bank of Ghana, the forex quote of the Bank of Ghana, as well as the interbank quotes. How can we strike the balance in addressing this situation?
It's more of a balance of issues here. For the central bank, what they have to do is to try as much as possible to meet the requests for forex from the banks. So if the central bank is not able to meet the request, then what happens is that these commercial banks or primary dealers will have to look for avenues to fill in the gap. And it is in looking for other sources to fill in the gap that tends to hike the price at which they get their forex to supply. That is what then affects what we contract the dollar for on the market. So if the central bank can meet as much as they can near supply needs, not exactly because the central bank will know how to do that, if they can supply as much as they can, then the quest for the banks to fall on other suppliers on the market to fill in the gap will be reduced. Then we can have some level of equilibrium between what the Bank of Ghana quotes and what the banks will also quote to the public.
Interesting. But of course, let's turn our attention to developments in the United States, because we do know that the IMF is sounding an alarm of a sort to African economies, including Ghana, of a possibility of the economies being affected should there be some changes in the inflationary rate of the US, especially when it could impact the cost of the dollar. Subsequently, can we then project that, how best the cedi could in any way appreciate against the dollar like it happened last year for the Zambian kwacha and the Angolan kwanza?
Yeah, see, if the US is going to have some inflationary pressures, then what it means is that the inflationary pressures will be transmitted into rates that the US would like to quote for its instruments. And once the US inches up its interest rate, and what will happen is that funds will then have to move into US dollar denominated instruments. Simply means that it will be more difficult to get the dollar. And that will mean that for markets like ours, we will have to pay more to get the dollar for our transactions. So we need to watch carefully how the US will behave and its implication. If there is any rate hike in inflation, definitely there'll be compensation through interest rates, making US dollar denominated instruments more preferred, which will then affect our currency.
Interesting. But, finally, the report also highlights some macroeconomic areas such as exports and inflation. Are we looking good on these lines? Do we still have Dr. Benjamin Amwan? I'm afraid we have lost him there. But of course, we appreciate the inputs that he's, made into the outlook of the cedi on the forex market, also assessing, the development in the United States regarding inflationary pressures. Well, Doc, I think we have him back on the line. Just before the trip, we wanted to find out the report highlighting some macroeconomic areas such as exports and inflation. Are we good? Are we looking good on these lines?
The exports, yes, we are looking good because, but for COVID, we'll have had more positive inflows from export. But then for imports, we are still struggling because structurally, we have not been able to create an economy that is more domesticated. And so we tend to still consume more of our goods and services through imports. And that is where our challenge, by way of controlling the cedi's value against the US dollar, becomes a problem. If only we can work towards a situation where we buy more of our inputs locally, especially through the government, because the government happens to be the largest purchaser of goods and services, then we can have some price stability for the currency.
Well, Dr. Benjamin Amwan, we're grateful that you could join us. He's Executive Director of the Center for Economics, Finance and Inequality Studies. Well, you're still watching the marketplace. Let's move on to the trade market, because the African Continental Free Trade Area celebrated its first anniversary on the 1st of January this year. Since Africa officially started trading under this single pact, the practical impacts of the agreement have been minimal. Disruptions of global supply chains due to COVID-19 restrictions in 2020 limited AFTA's potential. Amid the challenges, the Secretary General Wamkele Mene is forging ahead with hopes of publishing a tariff book which includes the rules of origin and customs procedures regarding products. Now, this will be in February as negotiations still are ongoing. Well, let's now connect with Mr. Frank Ajokum of the Secretary. He's the Secretary of the Ghana, Executive Secretary actually, of the Ghana International Trade Commission. We're grateful, sir, that you could join us on the program. First of all, the Continental Free Trade enters its first year with the never-ending discussion on the rules of origin, which is the intersection between the trade and the possible industrial policy. What must give to ensure there is progress?
Well, thank you very much, and pleasure to be on. What must give is that everybody should be of one accord, in the sense that we must have an agreement across country lines as to how much percentage you constitute original goods from your country, and which would constitute foreign addition to the product. So these are things that are being worked on. You don't have easy solutions to this, because there are different products and different makes and different mixes. So the only thing to say is that there's goodwill and everybody's trying to work towards it. We need time in these things, because you don't have quick fixes in this. And as I said, it's for everybody across board, all the countries, to then be able to say that these are comfort zones, or this is what we think we can go ahead with. And there should be a kind of minimum threshold that could be accepted across board. Then we can move forward.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about the interference of external partners pushing the agenda of divide and rule, with, Kenya's free trade deal with the U.S. as a case in point. How can the Secretariat whip signatories in line without seeming to distort a free market system?
Well, those are dicey issue, in the sense that once the Secretariat is not fully ready to have the policy fully implemented, countries are able to they can't stand still, and they must then be able to go ahead and do some of the things that they have to do. For instance, Ghana did sign an interim economic arrangement with the UK, and where there's interim, and in doing that, Ghana reflected very much on what ECOWAS was doing in terms of its trade agreements, so that when we come into full session to implementation, we are then able to synchronize in such a way that if even there are disparities, there are not a lot of disparities. I believe that is what's happening around the continent. But then I agree with you entirely that it's about time that we had a single trade agreement across board, since that's what we are heading towards. And since not all the countries, as you know, are ready, we'll need time to get some of these things done. Don't forget that this trade agreement is just 1 year old, and many countries are now beginning to adjust their systems and their procedures to fit into whatever we have signed on to. So yes, while we're in a haste, we should be mindful of the peculiarities of the various countries, and also the fact that even as countries need to move ahead. So we realize that everybody is working towards ensuring that the terms and agreements reached under the trade liberal agreements are fully implemented. So I can only think that time would get there, but now we should hasten slowly.
All right, Mr. Ajokum, hold on for us. I want you to take a listen to the Secretary General of the, after Secretariat, Wamkele Mene, after which we get your response on the concerns regarding the lack of capacity.
Typically, trade agreements are negotiated in phases and implemented in phases. And so I think we should expect that this will not be any different from trade agreements around the world, whether it's a WTO or indeed other regional trade agreements. They do take time. They're very complex, very, very technical, and have far-reaching obligations for countries that negotiate them. And so countries tend to want to take quite a lot of time to deliberate on the implications and the obligations that they are undertaking. So I am not particularly worried. On the contrary, I think that we have a lot in terms of to celebrate the fact that in less than 5 years, we've negotiated a comprehensive trade agreement. Yes, there are still some outstanding areas, but as I've just noted, that is typical of the way in which these trade agreements are negotiated. We have reached about 87.8% agreement on rules of origin, which is a very, very high threshold of consensus for product-specific rules of origin.
Of course, that was, an update regarding the pace at which we are when it comes to the continental free trade. Mr. Jacome, you have heard the, Secretary General. How much of a concern is the lack of capacity in the Secretariat to push the agenda of a single African market, given its launch in the middle of the pandemic?
Well, I'm not too sure of the lack of capacity because I didn't hear him say that, but as has been said, and as the Secretary General did rightly say, we need time, and these things take quite a bit of time. You are dealing with countries who have to change their systems that they've been operating all of a sudden and get into the free trade era. Yes, and as much as I know that many countries would want to do that, we also have to understand that can't all be on the same playing sheet at the same time. And as you realize, even within the procedures, we have certain goods that can be liberalized 90%, 90% of goods that are liberalized 0% from now on, some that will come on board 5 years or 10 years from now. So it's all because even at the signing stage or the preparatory stage, we realize that not everything can be brought into the system at the same time.
Exactly.
And at the second, we have to go in phases. So we are going in there, and in terms of capacity, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not too sure the Secretariat has come up with any such issues, but I'm sure if there are, they will be addressed in due course.
We're grateful, Mr. Franco Jacome, that you could help us with the analysis on the situation regarding the single market and prospects for 2022. You're still watching the marketplace. Still to come in the bulletin, there are calls for the African financial regulators to fast-track processes to regulate digital currencies on the continent. We'll engage a digital currency analyst with the African Consolidated Exchange.
The African continent, crypto is largely unregulated. We're going to be self-regulating, and we look forward to the day when the regulators open the doors for us to start putting in applications.
Now, a new digitized exchange market has been launched for Africa to use as a platform to control the pricing of mineral commodities on the continent. Now, this platform seeks to serve as a digitalized general store for all forex traders, crypto traders, shareholders, and investors in the financial market on the African continent and beyond. The founder of the African Consolidated Exchange, ASEX, Ian Muller, joins us via Zoom for some perspective on this new platform and cryptocurrency on the continent. Of course, first of all, how do you want African central banks to regulate cryptocurrency?
Well, African central banks, and thank you for having me. African central banks need to come up to speed and understand that crypto is here to stay. Recently, the New York State Department of Financial Services went into partnership with two large crypto exchanges and created a stable coin, a crypto coin, to onboard trading in the environment. Now, that should tell you a story where crypto is going. In other words, what is the next step that the central banks on our continent need to do? Central banks on our continent need to invite players like ourselves and several others on the African continent to contribute into how they should now start looking at regulating the market and onboarding players at all different levels, to create an enabling environment that they themselves can regulate and will bring about economic growth just about everywhere. I think that's what needs to happen. So what is happening there in the US with the New York State Department of Financial Services with the two large cryptos is not just an experiment. It is something that we now need to take serious, sit up. We can no longer sit on our hands and then just watch over and hope something somehow will just work itself out. No, I don't think that is the way it should happen. I think the way forward is the central banks need to invite us and have a discussion on the way forward.
And of course, we're having this discussion on the back of Ghana and Nigeria already introducing, a centralized digital currency to, offset most of these imbalances. What's your assessment of its impact on the decentralization of the crypto market in Africa?
Well, first of all, that needs to be celebrated. That move itself is bold. It needs to be celebrated. Other central banks need to learn from what the Ghanaians and Nigerians are doing, and they need to take that serious. But the digital currency coming on board is not necessarily a cryptocurrency. It is just a digitized form of the original currency that they've been running with. But we need to be able, or rather we who are running the different exchanges are providing this bridge between the traditional markets, where now they're digitizing their currencies, and the crypto world. And so, yeah, we do celebrate them. And I think that step that they've made is fantastic, and it should bring about a serious economic growth going forward.
Well, Ian, let's
away the clutter. So, sorry.
Great. Well, let's practicalize, what exactly is in force. A small entrepreneur with a disposable income of, let's say, $50 to $150, dollars. What are the options of making money on the ASEX platform?
Well, the many options. I can even off the cuff just mention about 10. They're just so numerous of them. But one obvious one is that someone with that kind of capital, they need to be able to go and invest in the companies that and projects that are going to be listed on the ASEX. All right. Now, as you know, there's both a bit of risk and a great opportunity in investing in, startups and junior projects in just about every industry. And so the investors, of course, need to do their own due diligence and consult a financial expert before they can invest. But those opportunities are there. They can go and invest in any one of the startups or any one of the junior projects. We've got a few junior mining projects that are going to be listed on the exchange. They can invest in that, and then they can expect growth from that. Apart from that, of course, there is the trading. They can trade the financial markets. There are so many assets that are now going to be listed on the exchange going forward. And so they can participate in just the ordinary day trading and generate an income from there, that which they can monetize literally on a daily basis and be able to make a living out of it. So that is one or two avenues that I can mention right away off the cuff that are clear opportunities for someone with that kind of disposable income. Needless to say, if someone has some marketing skills, they can sign up and become just an introducing broker and use that kind of equity, to just buy some data and some airtime and use the mobile phone to do some introductions, and they can earn income from that. And that's just an awesome way to. I started like that in the financial markets many years ago, almost 2 decades ago. And so I would recommend that to just about anyone who just wants to get started with that kind of money.
Well, let's end on the matter of risks, Ian, because we do know that when it comes to the Forex and the cryptocurrency, market, the risks are so high to the extent that investors often shy away, those who do not have the belly to contain most of these risks shy away in that particular regard. How do you foresee the future when it comes to investment within these channels, especially in a continent as Africa?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean, especially in the continent such as Africa, because crypto is global. And yes, there are risks. The volatility is quite enormous in the crypto markets, and so it can wipe out one's working capital, and they can end up without a shirt on their back. Now, look, there are risks just about in every market. You can go and invest in, let's not mention salaries, but in any one of the US 30 listed companies on the Dow Jones, and you could still lose your capital if something happens drastic in the market. So there are risks just about everywhere. It's just that the crypto industry is still fairly new. The volatility and the risks associated with trading cryptos is not a bad thing at all, because the volatility itself is what actually creates the opportunities. But the risks, of course, they're enormous. One needs to be very careful,
All right.
As they get started, they need to get some kind of education.
Ian, we're grateful that you could help us understand and appreciate the matters of crypto much more extensively. He's the founder of the African Consolidated Exchange, ACEX. Many thanks once again. Well, that'll be it for this edition of The Marketplace. For more news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. I'm Charles Ayete. For me and the production team, many thanks for watching.